What is up, fellas? Dominic rolling solo here today. Brian sends his regards. And I'm recording this special bonus episode because Brian and I wanted to give you a little heads up about a change that's taking place very soon. The Man Amongst Men podcast is about to undergo a name change. The podcast name will be revealed later, and it's going to change on November 11th. If you are already subscribed to us, there's nothing you need to do. This is just a heads up. Your subscription will automatically be updated. If you're not yet subscribed, I'd encourage you to do that right now so you can easily find us in your feed later. So like I just said, I'll unveil the name of the show in a few moments. And more importantly, we'll share with you how you helped us with this process of renaming. But first, let's get into today's episode. Discovering the great man within you. Over this last almost year of running the show, Brian and I have really refined our listening to what content, concepts, and challenges that you resonate most deeply with. Through your emails and comments, DMs, text messages, and the in-person workshops and retreats that we've run, there's a consistent theme of the most valuable concepts that keep rising to the top. One of those is a quote that we introduced, I believe, in our second ever podcast, episode number 2, which is called The Number One Enemy to Living a Powerful Life. It's our second most downloaded episode, so go check it out. It's called The Number One Enemy to Living a Powerful Life. And the quote is entitled, The Definition of Hell. And if you haven't heard it before, let me share it with you. The definition of hell is on your last day on earth. The man that you became meets the man you could have become. Let me say that again. The definition of hell is on your last day on earth. The man that you became meets the man that you could have become. Now, if that doesn't send a chill down your spine, you might be dead inside. The idea of taking my last breath, confronted with the reality that I didn't live my life to the fullest, that I didn't realize my fullest potential, and instead I chose a path of safety, comfort, conservatism, that, my friends, is my definition of a personal hell. And as it turns out, many of you feel the same exact way. I can't tell you how many of you guys have reached out to tell me that that quote shook you to your core, and in many cases was the catalyst for making real change in your lives. So in hearing your stories of transformation over and over again, tracking back to the hearing of this quote, it set off a flurry of questions in my mind. Like, who is that man that you became? That disappointing man who didn't live his fullest potential? Who is the man that you could have become? How can we discover who he is? And what are the series of life actions that you can take or not take that would lead you to living that man that you could have become? I've literally spent months thinking, reflecting, journaling, and meditating on this. And one morning, I literally woke up with the answer. It came to me so subtly and without any fanfare that I almost shook it off with my morning yawn to be potentially lost forever. But here's what I was able to capture. Every man has two men living inside of him. The good enough man and the great man. In the definition of hell, the good enough man is the man that you became. The great man within you is the man that you could have become. So very few men have embarked on the inner journey and refined their awareness to enough to identify the great man inside of them, let alone find the courage to live that great man for the rest of their lives. Instead, 98% of men will choose to settle into a lifetime of living their good enough man. You see, the good enough man wants to make more money. He wants to earn more respect and credibility than he has presently. He desires more freedom and autonomy. He wishes to relieve himself of the burdens and responsibilities that he's accumulated, and he lusts after a more exciting and dynamic sex life. But he is unwilling to develop the courage and take the critical actions that will bring him everything he desires. Why? Because he's comfortable. He's comfortable in the life that he's created for himself. And because he fears rocking the boat, he fears facing rejection, criticism, or experiencing loss. So instead, he clings to what he's already accumulated and bunkers down for a lifetime of incremental movements. All the while trying to stomp out that nagging voice inside of him, which is not so subtly calling him on the journey to someone greater. And that nagging voice is the great man trying to get your fucking attention. And the great man, I've come to learn, can be a bit of a bastard when he feels like he's being ignored. He's the one who wakes you up in the middle of the night with that existential panic of, what the hell am I doing here and what is this life for? He's the one who takes the very fire that drove you for decades of your life and suddenly extinguishes it, stripping you of your drive and leaving you grasping for a new sense of purpose, but not knowing where to turn. He's the one who gives you migraines, back pain, insomnia, even heart attacks, desperately trying to send you a wake-up call to the fact that how you are living isn't cutting it, and that he is right there to show you the new way if you're willing to give up good enough. The sad reality is most men are not. Instead, they'll ignore these calls from the great man and dive back into workaholism or overindulge in things like porn, sports, news, drugs, booze, gambling, emotional eating, and women to distract themselves from the pain, from those callings. These men are destined to live the definition of hell. Napoleon Hill, who's one of the greatest mentors to the show, posthumously, because he's no longer living, in his legendary book, Outwitting the Devil, he tells us how men end up drifting away their entire lives, living as this good enough man. And many of you who have been listening to the show will have heard this story many times, but I will encourage you to listen to it again because every time you hear it, it sinks in more deeply. Napoleon Hill grew up during the Great Depression era, and he had a mentor by the name of Andrew Carnegie of Carnegie Steel. And Carnegie told Napoleon, if you want to learn what the full human existence is like, why people don't end up living a life of success, then go out and interview thousands of men who on their deathbeds felt like they had a life of regret, like they had left chips on the table, like they did not achieve what they wanted to in their time here. So over a 25-year period of time, Napoleon Hill went out and interviewed 25,000 of these men. He distilled their stories and their secrets, and he wrote the book Outwitting the Devil, which is a cautionary tale for what happens when you drift through life. And there was this passage I remember reading during Hurricane Sandy in New York City. I believe it was 2012, where I had no power, no lights, no electricity, no Wi-Fi in my apartment. All I had was Outwitting the Devil, a flashlight, and this passage that I read shook me to my core, and it said, and this is the devil speaking, "The way that I enter the minds of people is through habit, and through this principle, I establish the habit of drifting. And when I get a person to drift, I can lead him straight towards the gates of hell." And that is the devil speaking. And what the devil is trying to say is that we think that we are in conscious command of all of our actions and our decisions, when in actuality, we're not even behind the driver's wheel of our own car. We're sitting in the back seat. It is our patterns, our habits, our belief systems, our unconscious habituated movements through life. That is what's driving the wheel of our car. And we're often just a passenger along the journey. And it's only when an outside force thrusts itself upon you do you wake up to start asking yourself different questions about how you're living your life. And while those outside forces thrusting themselves upon you oftentimes are pretty crappy, they're usually like an unexpected illness or the loss of a loved one or your job laying you off or restructuring the business. Those can be some of the most transformative, transcendent moments of your life. They can start a new trajectory for you. I'm willing to bet that you have one of those trials and tribulations from your past That turned you into the man that you are today, and you would never sacrifice that experience. Even when you were going through it, it was torture. But my question for you is, if the only catalyst for you making change in your life is waiting for an outside force to thrust itself upon you, then how in command of your life are you really? The good news is, or perhaps I should say, the great news is, you have already met the great man within you many times. He's the one who's been there when you've demonstrated extraordinary courage in the face of adversity and you've prevailed. He's been the one who's picked your ass up off the floor when you have been beaten down and you've come back stronger and better than ever. He's the one who you relied upon to make those gut decisions that led to some of the best moments of your life. And he's the one constantly calling you forward into living out your bigger dreams and deeper desires. He's always been there, nudging, calling, screaming for you to step up into him. Will you be one of the 2% of men who has the courage to discover and live the great man within you? And if you haven't figured it out by now, on November 11th, the new name of this show will be The Great Man Podcast. Our mission will be the same as it always has: to help men live the highest versions of themselves and to create environments where the people you care about can thrive. And once again, if you've already subscribed, there's nothing you need to do. Your subscription will automatically be updated. Now, we have been experiencing some awesome growth in our listenership over these last few months. 30, 50, 60% growth month over month, which compounds quickly. And we want to thank you for spreading the word. And please continue to do so, because the more great men that are walking this earth, the better this world will be. I'd like to leave you with 3 ways to discover and live out the great man within you. Number 1, write your eulogy. One of these days, you will leave this planet, and someone somewhere will stand at a podium and say some pretty amazing things about you that you will never get a chance to hear. But what if you lived your life with such intentionality that you knew exactly what that person would say? Imagine living the next 30, 60, or 90 years as the great man within you. How would you be described at the end of your life? What impact did you make on your family, your friends, the businesses and communities that you're responsible for? What legacy did you leave behind that lives beyond you? How did you feel about yourself as you took your last breath, knowing you had lived your life to its fullest? Writing your eulogy is one of the best exercises in connecting with the great man within you. And if you'd like a step-by-step exercise on how to do this most effectively, I wrote about this extensively in my book, Design Your Future. Number 2, survey 20 people. Here's what you're going to do. Write down a list of 20 names that encompass family, friends, romantic interests of the past and present, mentors, mentees, and business associates, or whoever else that you respect and would want their feedback from. And you're going to ask them these 3 very simple questions. Number 1, when I am my best self, what are 3 words that you would use to describe me? When I am my best self, what are 3 words that you would use to describe me? Number 2, when I am my best self around you, how do I make you feel? I'll say that again. When I am my best self around you, how do I make you feel when you're in my presence? And number 3, how can you tell when I am not acting from my best self? And what is its impact on you? How can you tell when I am not acting from my best self, and what is its impact on you? In this exercise, you are looking for themes as to the gifts that other people see in you, as well as the moments where you are drifting. And the third and final way that you can discover and live the great man within you is to continue going deeper on this work. I've already mentioned before that you should go back to listen to episode number 2, the number 1 enemy to living a powerful life. It's all about this concept of drift, how people get there. We unpack Outwitting the Devil, the book, and we also talk deeply about the definition of hell, ending up your last day on earth. The person that you became meets the man that you could have become, and how to avoid that. I've also mentioned Outwitting the Devil a number of times. Read that book. That is the number one most influential book of my life. And then finally, there's a select few of you men who are listening right now who want to step out from behind these AirPods that you're listening to the show on, wherever you're listening to the show, and you want to actually go and do deeper work. And for those of you who are interested, you can go into your web browser and type in thegreatmanmastermind.com. thegreatmanmastermind.com. I'm not going to say much more about it, but if you're feeling called, go to thegreatmanmastermind.com. Take a look. If it lights your fire, there's a way to get in touch. Once again, on November 11th, this show will be retitled The Great Man Podcast, and we want to thank you for guiding us here. Thank you again for being such amazing listeners and for helping us to spread the word and having such a great increase in our listenership. It is our mission to unlock more of the great man in this world so this world will become a better place. Thank you.